G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the WORX Plus Tech Talk Concrete Grinder build. Now, you think I look like a control freak? Trust me, I've got nothing on these next two guys. You want to see freaks? Come with me. So Hayden, we're back.
We are back, and man, have we got a handful here.
What are we talking about today?
Remotes.
Oh, so
You like
compact.
it? It's left, right, up, down, power. Eat smart. See? A smart remote. How many smart remotes do you know of?
Well, I've got one. It's Ben's.
No, we're talking about remote controls on machines. As you can see, we've got a bit of an array of different designs and different manufacturers here. So I thought we'd go through what's it all about? What are the differences? What do we like? What do we dislike? So, I guess in the past we've spoken about all the machines needing push machines, remote machines, and we've touched on why RC machines came about, which was to assist with the operator, give them a bit more life in the trade, make it a lot easier to move machines on and off site. Anything else you can think of?
Well, they free up the operator, of course, from the task, from actually being engaged with the machine. So the whole idea, we talked about the wheel drive system last episode, and this is obviously the other half of the story. We've got a wheel drive system does all the grunt work essentially, but we've got to control that somehow. And we use the radio control system, which is your transmitter and your receiver and whatever electronic smarts you have in between, to, I guess, bridge that connection between what the operator wants to do with the machine. Now he's not
hanging off the back of it.
Not hanging on and moving it and guiding it the way he wants to anymore. So we're trying to emulate or replicate that connection with the machine between operator and machine without actually having a physical connection anymore. And clearly there's lots of people that have tried to do that in different ways.
There are.
And there's a big part of the radio, the transmitter is one part, but obviously there's the electronic smarts that happen in between of that as well. That this thing's talking to. So it's essentially we're trying to send a signal. We're trying to talk to our machine from a remote location for it to behave in a way that we would want it to behave if we were actually if it was an extension of ourselves. If we were literally still pushing the machine around and manoeuvring it just in the way or the speed or whatever it happens to be, and trying to create that. I mean, a lot of the people that grew up in the push machine era were very slow to embrace the radio control because there was this feel, there was this touch that was involved. They were very in tune from a feel with the machine and connection. Obviously, we're trying to make that connection as realistic as possible without that physical connection being there anymore. So let's talk a little bit about RCs and some of their features in the context of trying to create that, maintain that connection between man and machine without actually having the physical strain and the physical constraints as to being holding onto a machine and being tethered to it the whole time in order to free that labour up.
Yep. Look, I think a big starting point is when you look through the different manufacturers out there, there's two different avenues that they take when they're selecting a remote control. There's a lot of controls out there you can buy that have a receiver built in that automatically talks straight down to the wheel system you're using. Doesn't give you much control over what you can do button-wise. There's pre-selected things you can have on there, but not a lot of variance in what you can do. Then you move up to the next sort of level where the receiver is more programmable, more like a PLC, where you can then play with it a bit more, which is usually where you start finding your colour screens and things coming in because they have a bit more flexibility with what they can do with this data and how they do it. So two big things in there when you're looking at the remotes of manufacturers is what options did they look at, and is it off the shelf or have they custom designed from scratch? So that's it's always interesting to look across new machines when they arrive in as to what they're using, because it's a fair chunk of them are off the shelf.
Yep.
So,
well, it's an interesting point because basically we're looking at these handheld transmitters here. You've mentioned a screen. Some of them don't have one. Some of them do, and some of them are bigger than others. So they're already falling into two different categories, aren't they? With screens and without screens. Let's talk a little bit about the ones that don't have screens for starters. I'm going to lean a lot on you on a lot of you for this conversation because you know and have had experience with these things a lot more than I have. Let's talk about the purpose of the screen or the transmitter without the screen.
Yeah, so look at the transmitter without the screen. You rely on a lot of analog dials and things to give you the information of what your settings are, even to do with your head speeds, wheel speeds, anything there. Usually it's a switch in and it's on or off kind of style. There's no...
Or it's a dial with a number 1 to 10 or something like that.
That's right. So they're very, very basic. And again, that comes down to the limitations of it's preset. You don't, you plug it in and everything just works. So there's no having to fiddle with it. But again, an operator, example is the HTC one there. Back in the day when they were using them, it was probably one of the earlier remote control machines that came out. So it was a good step up compared to the push machine. But to nowadays, what people want to see, that's where the screens start coming in. The information is what people want. So it's, you want to be able to see how many amps you're drawing, all the data that the machine's got, plus a bit more finer detail on what you want to set the machine to. So going from an analog to a digital gives you a whole lot more steps in what you can adjust. Because you've only got 0 to 100%. There's only so much reading in a dial that it can do. And as it goes back to a PLC, it also has to smooth that out and work out a position that you've got it in. So definitely without a screen, it's an operator's still left a fair bit in the dark, or they're having to look inside their machine and get the details the old-fashioned way from that. So step up into the remotes with a screen. Obviously, you've got a lot more data coming through. Still, some of them that have smaller like LCD screens, but you can get enough data to get the basic information. Still, compared to what we nowadays for technical support, we want a lot more data from the guys when they're having a drama. So these ones with bigger screens tend to give us a lot more information about what we want to know when we're trying to sort out a problem. But even for guys when polishing, to have that bit more data of how much power am I using, a bit more around their speeds, even showing directions, as simple as that is, and just at a glance being able to see what they're doing.
So directions of the discs and the planetary heads and so forth you're talking about there when you're talking about directions? Yep.
So they're the main big things in the difference between not having a screen versus having it. Obviously there's cost trade-offs to it as well.
Yep.
But most of the manufacturers now are coming out with screens on them. They're getting more and more accessible from technology. It's a lot rarer that you're going to find a remote without a screen.
Yeah. And then, of course, when it comes to the size of the screen, we still need to be able to read these things, right? So the real estate you've got to play with, or what you can actually display, is going to be very much dependent on how big the screen is to begin with.
Correct. Yeah, exactly right. It's it also comes down to the design side of it as well. You've only got so much real estate to work with. And a lot of these screens, they're not the easiest things to program. They're once you go colour screens, they're very difficult. It's a whole different level of competency to be able to do it. But different size screens, obviously that has effects on battery life, things like that. But generally speaking, it's the bigger the screen, the better for the operator in my eyes. You can if it's hanging off your waist, you can see what you're looking at.
So Hayden, we've talked a little bit about probably some of the progression. You mentioned the HTC, I think it's an HDX. So that was probably, I'm going to say, 2005-ish era when they came out. So very much ahead of the curve at the time, all the way through to more screen-based radio controls. We've seen a lot of different radio control units. We've got 6 of them on display here. That's probably about half of what we've actually seen come through our workshop. So we've really had the benefit of seeing lots of different platforms being a service centre to many different manufacturers of machines. Let's talk about some of the features that don't work so well. Obviously, we've had a really good look at a lot of these different products when we've been working on our own new products. There are features that we would consider like the benchmark in the industry, and that's really, I guess, the best in class for what's available right now. And then there's a whole lot of things that even in some of the current manufacturers that are probably features that some of our customers would or operators would love to see gone. Okay, so a little or improved. So, how about we just talk a little bit about maybe some of the limiting features that that are just some low hanging fruit that the bugbears, and we've been able to sort of address some of those things.
I mean, look, a really, really big one that a lot of guys have is connectivity. Yep. That is a huge one. There's nothing worse than you're halfway through a job, it drops out, everything stops on you. You've got to start again, restart the machine. So there's some big ones on that. And that was, for us, was a big key feature is, all right, what's the connectivity going to be like on whatever it is we choose?
Yeah, and I can say from being a fly on the wall sometimes, I hear a lot of telephone calls and a lot of chatter around in the service shop about connectivity, things not connecting. Tell us, what are these connectivity issues? What do they generally come down to?
Look, probably the major component is what the communication method between the remote and the receiver is, whether it's radio, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. There's a whole range of them. They all get interfered with in some way from a different signal. So it might be a Wi-Fi router in a house you're using or an office block. There's heaps of different things that can cause this interference. And it might work on one job and the next job it's fine, and then you go to another one and it plays up again. So there's no rule of thumb as to how to fix it. It's really just a big trial and error in that regard. So that's probably the biggest cause of it, short of part failures and things like that. If cheaper components are getting used and parts are failing, then that obviously can play dramas in it.
Not to mention other devices. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I remember I was testing a machine. It was late on a Friday evening, and you came into our R&D centre and heading off, and my machine just stopped.
That's right.
And you'd walked in with your Bose headphones on,
Samsung
your smartphone, your phone on Bluetooth. And I just didn't believe it, the fact that you just walked within 10 metres of the machine, the whole thing just shut down. And once we turned all those things off, we're up and running again. So it's even something as simple as a wearable or something is in the actual vicinity.
That's right. The operator's sitting there calling everyone going, how do I fix this? It's like, well, the problem's actually you. As we found out. So, there you go, guys. Make sure you haven't got all your different things turned on. So,
so that was more in the Bluetooth-based platform. Correct. From an interference point of view?
And look, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are probably the most susceptible to these interruptions. Certainly once you go to radio, there's still things that can do it, but it's a little bit less. And there's multiple different ranges, signals. When you start talking this, there's a lot of detail to it. But there's different frequencies and things that they use to try and skip certain bands to get out of that range. But every country has different regs as to what you're allowed to use in the different countries.
So connectivity is a big one. Right. So we've put a lot of work into connectivity and stability in communication. What else is another bugbear?
Well, a big one is probably joystick control. For a lot of these, when I look through the range of machines here, I can see at least 3 that literally only let you autopilot forward, backwards, and steer left and right. So you don't actually have a full 360-degree use of the joystick. In that regard, some of them don't have autopilot. Some of them you actually have to set it forwards, and it's a set speed, and hold forwards is that maximum speed. So the joystick operation is probably critical. I mean, looking across these, I would probably say that these two are probably the closest to to what we would call the industry standard. From that respect. Also, little things like if you're on autopilot, how does the joystick react when you are? Even as silly as I just want to turn a corner a bit. You hit sideways, the next thing the thing takes off because it's trying to do full speed forwards, and you're telling it to turn left a little bit, and it just 90-degree turn. So again, that's a really big thing, is how that's going to operate for an operator. How it runs with autopilot running. Does it override it? Do you have to turn that off? Is autopilot your limit or your minimum? So all these things, I guess for an operator can be bit painful, especially if you've got a couple of different brands of machine. They're all different to try and learn and use. So
I would say one of my biggest bugbears using one of these joystick controlled machines in autopilot is that seems to be the faster I go when everything works really well down at a low speed when you're just crawling along. So when you're doing, say, a first cut, slow aggregate exposure, machine's doing a very slow wheel speed, everything seems to work really nicely. But if I'm I'm doing a final buff, and I've essentially got my autopilot, well, my wheel drive speed. It's really a wheel drive speed at the top end of the range. I almost end up having no reverse on my joystick. Literally, I can, if I'm going, if the range is 1 to 100, and I can be, if I'm going at 90 and I've raked, I'm wrenching back on that joystick to try and get the thing to back up. At the very most, I'm just putting the brakes on the machine. It's not actually going anywhere hardly. It's a real arm wrestle, essentially. So maybe talk a little bit about those sorts of things that it's, because we've got this big speed range, some of the things that are a problem with these platforms only show up in, a part of that speed band. Yeah, look, it's you start getting into a bit of the technical side of it, but when you have a joystick controlled, you have like the dual axis on it. And you're exactly right. If your autopilot is using 90% of that, when you pull it back, because it's up there, you actually only get whatever the remaining part of the end is. 10% in reverse.
Right? Which is really annoying, isn't it? So you got to sit there, get it all the way back, turn autopilot down, and then the thing takes off in reverse.
It can be a safety issue sometimes too.
For sure. So it's definitely, and even trying to turn a corner. You're at full speed and you just want to cruise around the corner, like I was saying before. How's that going to react? Does that change from low speed to high speed, what your reaction time is on the machine from left to right? And like I said, it's just being able to do a nice smooth turn in almost any scenario. There's no exact model out there that seems to have that nailed.
And obviously we started the conversation talking about we're trying to emulate what a user would want to do with their body if they were engaged with a pair of handlebars and so forth. And so there needs to be a lot of trust in the system, because when we're talking about, people want to grind as close to a footing of a pallet racking or a Dynabolt or along a gyprock wall, a drywall as they call it in the States, or a plasterboard wall here, and not just do a little adjustment and all of a sudden the head goes punching holes through the wall, or all of a sudden the machine just goes and clips the bottom of that steel footing on the pallet racking or whatever it happens to be. It's all about having trust and confidence and that fine control, knowing that, I can do that, right? Because you don't want to have to avoid something by a foot.
Have to do a whole lot of handwork.
That's all becomes handwork, right? And we're getting away from the whole, now we're getting back to manual again. We're starting to get creating more work for ourselves. So there's been a lot of work that we've done into that whole refinement and ability to adjust the motion.
Correct. It's even down to, and it's a massive connection between what we're talking about today and what we spoke about last week with the wheel drives. That confidence of, you don't have planar wheel drive, which means you're not trying to compensate using the remote as well. So when everything's tight and the remote's got nice control, you can sit 5 millimeters off a wall, no problem. If the machine's going to drive straight and you're not having to keep correcting constantly all day long, you get a sore thumb for a start. But like I say, it is a big trust thing. Trying to go along windows in a shop or whatever, it's an expensive stuff up if it goes wrong. So it definitely has been a lot of our time has been in refining a lot of those controls. Just picking the joystick as one alone, that's a huge amount of time just in that. Trialing, running, redoing, starting from scratch, trialing, running. It's amazing how much time that takes.
What about another one of my bugbears in some of these things is you've either got autopilot on, or you've got autopilot on, right? You don't have the option to actually run independently. Like there's sometimes I just want to manually control this thing with a joystick and not have this underlying speed issue that is already there from the autopilot.
Again, looking at the ones that are here, I can see 3 that you exactly right. Your autopilot is either on or it's off, and even then you still don't have any joystick control. It has to be moving forward in order to turn or do anything. Which again, I look at that and say the same. To me, it doesn't meet the benchmark of what you would want. If you're trying to replicate a human action, if I can go along a wall and I can sway a bit, do all those sorts of things, that's what these need to be able to do. So certainly, again, I think that falls back to a lot of it that it's off the shelf, and maybe it's not designed for this application. It's another application they've come in and used.
Yep.
So there's a few
or it's just a lower cost solution.
All that.
Okay. I mean, I guess that's part of the picture here. Just because it has a radio control, I'm not necessarily pointing this one out by singling this one out, but the fact that it has a radio control, and you see that in the brochure or you see it on the your website, it doesn't mean it'll do everything that you want from a control and functionality point of view. And generally the ones that will give you more of that, I mean, I think you mentioned it before, they start incorporating in the receiver side of things a lot more smarts or technology and hardware. That all becomes a lot more expensive too. So you can get entry level gear that will give you basic functionality, but it's rudimentary in the way that it actually behaves or delivers machine behaviour.
Correct.
If you really want the refinement and the efficiency in all those movements, you're starting to talk about much bigger dollars from a hardware point of view. And that doesn't even include any of the software development and programming that we've been doing and all the hours of user testing.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one that still astounds me with remote controls is how many machines have a remote control that can't be used when it's not connected to mains power.
So on the battery backup system, right?
It amazes me how many machines still have that to today.
So we're still pushing machines up ramps, or
well, look, a lot of them have a joystick on the actual machine.
Okay,
but you've got a remote. All of these ones. And you can't use it to just to drive it out off site. You got to hang on the handlebar. You got to stand there next to it. Even autopilot. If the machine's not plugged in, there's no autopilot of any sort.
So if you want to just drive across a car park or from one end of a Woolly store, you're sitting there leaning on the joystick the whole time. You can't just sort of switch into autopilot.
Look, another really big bugbear. I mean, I came from the push era, but when it went to remote, trying to get a remote control machine out of a van down the ramps. Sounds really easy, and it probably is at the end of the day. But it'd be so nice just to have a nice autopilot.
Autopilot in reverse,
bring
perhaps?
you in reverse.
Oh, that'd be nice, wouldn't
It'd be fantastic. It's just, you're hanging off this machine, this joystick. Depending if it's got a control and mount on the handlebar, sometimes you're having to hold the remote up against your hip. And it's just an awkward thing, to be able to just not worry about how fast you're going backwards and just worry about your left and right. Beautiful. So again, all of these things are the things we've been thinking about. Going, what can we do to help with all this? So,
well, you bring up a good point there. The actual how do you hold on to these things? Because if we look at these, we've got quite a range. We've got a nice little lightweight Orchestrum unit here. I think that's from a Scan Maskin. Through to this big boy. Looks like a version of an Ortec or something like that. We're carrying these things around.
We are.
And so each of these different units have different ways of strapping them to the operator.
Look, predominantly it seems to be majority of them are a belt. Seems to be belt or over the neck hanging. Generally, they're really the only two ways, which again comes down to are you having this thing hanging off you all day long? Is it light enough that when you don't want it hanging off you, can you hang on to it? And there's a big range of weight between all of these. They're really.
Well, I'm going to talk about. You've basically, so there's two options. There's the hook over the neck. And I don't mind the hook over the neck.
Around the back.
I think the Husqvarna's got that, and someone else. Problem with the hook over the neck is whenever I need to get down on the floor,
where do I put it?
This thing's now in the way, right? It's convenient while I'm standing, and it's comfortable. But if I've got to change a dust bag, or I've got to get down and check something on the floor, or machine's running by itself on a patch, a few holes, whatever, this thing is now right in the way. I can't squat down with it. That's what I do. I end up throwing that thing away. And now I'm just holding this radio control. Where do I put it?
That's right.
And thankfully the Husqvarna one's lightweight enough to sort of have hanging in your hand. But when I need to tip a machine back or something like that, where am I going to put this thing, right? And how many broken screens have we seen?
Just about to say, how many broken remotes have we had?
Because people haven't gone, oh, that was a really obvious place to put it on
that's right.
on the motor of the machine, and they'll tip it back and it falls off.
100%.
So it's not just about how comfortable it is when it's on you when you're using it. Is it in the way when I need to do a different task? And is it stored somewhere safe or easy? Am I looking around for a surface to put it on? Is there an obvious place to put it when I'm not using it? Yeah,
absolutely. It's there's, like I say, most of the ones are just the belt, and by the time you tighten it up, it's got to be loose enough that if you want to move it around or get it off, it's nothing worse to try and get a belt on and off all the time, isn't there? Look, another one is layout, which is, again, an interesting one when you look across these, is how easy is the layout to, how much room have you got around things, how many dials? I mean, I don't see one here, but one of the newer Juratics, I think it is, there's quite a lot of stuff on those. When I first saw one, I was looking going, that's a lot of things to play with and remember what they all do. So again, it's there's basic functionality that you need on there, I guess you would say, and then sometimes people take it a bit too far with options that are there on there for you to use. But again, on a lot of these, switches and dials are your only way of doing anything. Therefore, using that sort of analog side of it, for every option you have on it, there has to be a switch or a dial for it, which then becomes very, very, very clustered around that aspect. So again, that's something we looked at and went, well, if we want to put a whole pile of options on this, what are we going to do? We don't want 47 switches on the face of this.
No, so it's got to be intuitive. It's got to be meaningful to actually understand. So I think our solution is combination. We've got some buttons and dials and so forth, your essentials. But then we've also got a lot of screen buttons where we can actually have the ability to label buttons and change labels as they're being used in different functions. So it becomes pretty clear on what they do. We're not congesting up the whole deck, if I can call it, with a whole lot of buttons and labels and dials and so forth. We've kept that to a minimum and we've got buttons next to our actual screen, which we can program exactly how we want.
That's right, and that's what we talk back to that smarts again. Is when you start doing that, there's a lot more work required for doing that. So, what else have we got? We've talked about the things we don't like. Is there anything we like?
I'm sure there's lots of things that we like.
Look, there's definitely, so we've discussed a few, which is the weight of them. A nice, a too lighter remote is also, I think, no good, because you find, you just don't notice that it's sitting on something. Certainly, looking at this, we've got a whole lot of different handle arrangements as well. The ergonomics, as we've discussed a little bit, that's pretty important because the guys are using it every day, in and out. So, I mean, I look at something like this, and it would be quite painful, I think, to use with that cage all the way around trying to get in there. So that nice feel of just being comfortable when using it, there's nothing worse than, you're really having to reach through and kind of, get your hands in and really tight to do things. So having everything accessible, but just on a nice layout. And it doesn't sound like, a lot of people, I guess, probably don't think about it when they're looking at their remote, but left-handed, right-handed, what's the most common things you're touching and using with one hand versus another? What are things you're using at the same time together? It sounds like a really simple, small thing, but to actually go through every operation that you're using a remote control for and work that out, there's a fair bit of info there.
There is, and there's all these different stages and steps that people are doing. There's transportation, like you're talking about. There's lots of different contexts that it needs to work in. And again, unfortunately, you're not going to understand how much thought, time and how good a job any manufacturer has done on that base until you actually start using it.
That's right.
Because everything looks great in a brochure.
Exactly.
Generally speaking. I want to talk a little bit about the screen as well. Because I guess another really big element of the screen, or the potential capacity of the screen, is from a diagnostic and information point of view. Okay. So again, we're actually taking the connection between the man and the machine, potentially to a whole new level, even way past the push days, right? Push days, you're basically, you're listening to the pitch in the motor, you're feeling how, how hard it was biting on the floor, the diamonds and so forth. the screen can be a huge source of information, diagnostics, performance, plus a whole lot of different menus for different features and functions of the machine. Which goes way past the buttons and the dials and so forth too. So just talk us a little bit without giving too much away, because I know there's been a lot of work that you've done here with the techies. And we've done this all in-house too. We've had to do that. We started, I guess, just more of an FYI or fun fact is we did actually start doing this from an outsourced basis. But when I guess the ambition of what we were trying to do became so clear, we ended up landing in a position where we said we have to do this inside because we need people that get what we're doing, that get our industry, get this kind of machinery and really are really into this project. And I think we've come up with some really, really good solutions, certainly the foundations of what's going to be a really good platform going forward. But talk us a little bit about the screen and I guess how we've tried to utilise the capabilities or the functionality, the opportunities that a screen
has
adds to the whole user experience. And essentially, at the end of the day, we're looking at a technology that's supposed to make life easier and more efficient. So higher productivity and easier to do.
Yeah, I mean, you've pretty much tackled everything that I've got to talk about at the end of the day. No, okay, so definitely on the screen. Look, from my side of it, going from the service centre side of it now into working doing this machine. A big part of it for me was when someone calls up with an issue, what do I need to know? And going from all these machines, every one of them that are here, it was always open the back door on the machine and tell me. I'll talk you through how to go through the layers in the inverter and get the information for me. Time consuming. Guys on site just either don't have the time, they get frustrated spending all this downtime trying to do it.
They don't have the glasses.
The screen doesn't work. It doesn't light up. The up button doesn't work. All these sorts of things. There's always something that created a headache as to why you couldn't get all the information you needed to help a customer out. So my big drive was all this information that we need, which is how many amps you pull in, your speeds, your DC links, phase monitoring, all that kind of stuff, to build that into part of the remote. So you'll obviously see, with different things around the main screen display we've got. We've incorporated as much as we can onto that without clutter in it. Because there's some information that you need to see while you're grinding day in, day out. Wheel speeds, square meters per hour, things like that. Some metrics that you'll be using to assess your performance of how you're going. Plus to see if you're going to get the job done in the day. If you're sitting there doing 35 square meters an hour and you've got 700 squares to do, well, it's going to be a long day. At night, that's right. So that was a big part, and you'll see in the back there's a couple of images there, and that is just a handful of what we've gone through, layout wise to work out what we want to have on the screen. But then you go into, like you were saying, the using the buttons and things like that on the screen and that extra functionality, having different profiles, allowances in there. So, being able to set something up with, call it your favorites of what you like to use when grinding on certain applications. Having diagnostic, which has a whole lot more information in there, than probably an operator's even probably going to need. But it means that when I call up, and they've got a problem, everything that I need anywhere in the machine is in there and accessible to them. And eventually, just like now, so many customers, nowadays, they don't call me because I've basically taught them how to diagnose their own problems from going through it all the time. So that will happen again when they've got all this information. We don't want to make menus too deep and too, you don't have to go 10 layers deep to find something. So it's about going, right, what's needed for an operator, how to display it the easiest without having sub-menu after sub-menu after sub-menu to find something.
And we don't want to go the other way where we go, basically problem the machine, take it to your nearest service centre, right? Because that doesn't help anyone in the middle of the day, in the middle of a project when they're on the pump getting it done, right?
Or middle of the night. Quite frequently.
And then quite often they'll take it to that service centre and it won't be the fault, right? Because it might be power related, or it might be power lead related, or it might be the generator, or it could be a whole bunch of different things.
That's right.
Even the application that is not reproducing that issue once it's been taken off site. and has gone to that said service centre.
Exactly right. So yeah, another big one for us was when there are faults coming up, give a bit more of an explanation as to what the fault is and what it might be for them to check before they even have to call us. Because if we can point them in the right direction as to, incoming power, or it's here or it's there, check your plugs, they can do all these checks before they've even called, and high likelihood they'll find the issue before they even have to call.
Yeah. So I think what's an interesting part, we talked a little bit, I think in the last wheel drive episode we did about we talked about there being a transmitter, a receiver, a PLC, and the wheel drives, and then obviously your frequency inverters and so forth off to the side. Essentially, this machine, we've got everything talking the same language, right? Correct. So every device, or pretty much every electronic device within the cabinet is talking a particular communication protocol, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, I just think of it, they're sending Morse code to each other, right? It's a bit like that, all right? And because they're all talking the same language, and we've got that central brain, that PLC in there, we're able to set up a framework of diagnostics where it can say, well, we know this is the component that's the problem.
Correct.
And this is what the actual problem is. Whereas my understanding is every other machine that comes through this place, there's always a fair bit of process of elimination where we're sort of going through, step by step by step to try and work out, it was the voltage relay monitor or whatever it was, okay?
Yep.
But now we've got everything basically talking in the same language to each other. My understanding is now it makes it a whole lot easier for us to be able to pinpoint where the actual problem it is, whether it's the left wheel motor, or it's the right wheel motor, or whether it's the big frequency inverter, or whatever it happens to be.
100%. Yeah, because everything's reporting back to that central unit. It can then sit there and go, right, well, I'm not getting what I want from this, or that's pulling too much current, or I'm not seeing movement on that wheel for some reason, and report back, and then that helps us flag up, okay, there's a problem with this. But it can see it, okay, maybe it's a problem with power, or it's a connection on the data. So it gives us a lot more flexibility with working with fault codes and things like that to report back to an operator and say, hey, this is where we think the problem is. And not even when a problem occurs, but when something's happening that shouldn't be happening, to even put a warning up and say, hey, this is this thing's pulling way too much current. Maybe check something. Or
there's a big imbalance in current between one wheel and the other wheel, or something like that.
Exactly. So we've got a lot of flexibility in the systems that we've chosen, and like I say, now that they're all talking the one language and everything's reporting back, means that it's a lot easier to set up these assistances, I guess.
And that's all made possible by the screen, right? No screen. It's pretty much impossible to report all that back, right? So,
Correct.
Again, we've spent a lot of money in not just developing, but actually choosing an expensive unit because it enables us to get that kind of information. And
that's right.
Not just volume, but also quality of information back to the user. And if they have to, on the phone to us, whatever, we've got really good access to intel, and hopefully avoid that pack up for the day, throw it back, try and get it off the third floor, into the truck so I can get it back to someone that is not going to be able to see the problem
that's exactly
that I was actually experiencing.
Yeah, 100%. It's like I said, we had a whole pile of checkboxes when we were looking around at different brands that we had. We said we wanted to meet, and that was I don't think there was any of those that we ended up not being able to tick. So pretty much everything we spoke about today is it was a checkbox on ours, and I think so far we've done pretty well. So.
Well, Hayden, I've really enjoyed nerding out on the whole RC side of things. It clearly is a really good example of it's not just a matter of picking a transmitter and just getting it to talk to a machine and getting everything working the way that you would hope or expect.
There's no out of the box solution for good quality, that's for sure. A lot of time, a lot of effort, but I think we've nailed it.
No, I think we've got a really good end result. Everything that I've seen and had to play with, I'm really enjoying it. I'm jealous of our customers. They're getting all the gear that I wish I had when I was on the tools.
See, I beg differ. I think they're jealous of you right now.
Sitting next to you, I think anyone would be jealous of that, Hayden. So thanks for your time. It's been a good discussion, and looking forward to the next one. I can't remember what we're talking about, but...
oh, no, it's up to Josh nowadays. We'll see what Josh has got to say about it.
Well, don't say I didn't warn you. Has anyone ever told these guys you never go full remote hard? Clearly not. Well, that was very in-depth and insightful, and I'm starting to get the feeling you guys, I got the same feeling I've got, and you're going, when are we going to put this whole thing together? Well, rest assured, I believe there's 2 more things that we need to cover before we start putting this in together. And if you've been watching the whole time along, you're probably at the point where you're nearly ready to put it together yourself. So guys, again, thanks for watching. I hope this has been enjoyable and insightful, and that you're getting to really know this machine before it comes to life. I'll see you guys in the next episode.